Things Getting Strange in X-Files Rewatch podcast. I'm Nick.
And I'm Kim.
And we're bereft of news.
We seem to be in a dry spell now all of those conventions are over.
Yeah, and we've got a book coming up next year, a reboot series coming sometime, and yeah, that's what it is, isn't it? Oh well, I suppose we should get to episodes then.
Yeah, I guess so.
Unless anyone's got some news to contact us with, there's always hit up Kim on Twitter.
Yeah, just give me a shout on Twitter. I'm happy to promote anything X-Files you've got going, be it competitions, conventions, fan events, fanzines, anything you got on the go.
Okay, so for now, we'll go sci-fi with Kill Switch.
Technically, we're sci-fi in the X-Files anyway, a series about aliens.
We'll go cyberpunk. How about that?
That's better.
Okay. Kill Switch, directed by Rob Bowman, written by William Gibson and Tom Maddox. First broadcast on the 15th of Feb, 1998. Guest stars. We have Peter Williams as Jackson, who was in Dead Like Me and Due South, and The Chronicles of Riddick. Kristen Lehrman, who played Invisigoth. She was in Due South. She was also in Chronicles of Riddick, but only in the director's cut. And she was in Castle.
Okay.
But then, we keep finding these ones, and I love them. So, we've got Ted Cole, who played Paramedic number 2. He was in, ready?
Yep.
Death Note. He's a dub person, obviously.
Okay.
Death Note. He's in Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, specifically the Ocean dub, so I think there's been more than one of those. Inuyasha. In Random and a Half, he played Kuno.
Okay, yeah.
He was in Escaflowne, and here's the great bit. He's in Death Note, the Netflix version.
Oh no.
Oh no. As the voice of Lindell Taylor.
Oh, specifically Lindell Taylor and not Elle.
Specifically Lindell Taylor.
Ah, cool. Do you have a synopsis for this episode?
I do. At a diner in Washington, D.C., a man tries to access files on a laptop computer, but is repeatedly denied. While this is happening, several drug dealers receive anonymous phone calls about the whereabouts of their competitors and defectors. They are told they are all at the same diner. Two US Marshals receive a similar phone call about an escaped prisoner. The drug dealers arrive as the man attempts to gain access to the files. Just as he does so and loads a CD into his laptop, the two marshals appear and a shootout ensues. Mulder and Scully arrive and identify the bodies of the drug dealers. Mulder also identifies the man with the laptop as Donald Gelman, a Silicon Valley folk hero who aspired to create an artificial intelligence. Mulder takes Gelman's laptop and finds a CD inside. When he puts it into the car stereo, it plays Twilight Time by the Platters. The agents take it to the lone gunman, who discover that the disk contains a large quantity of encrypted data. The trio, however, are unable to decrypt it. Upon Scully's suggestion, they access Gelman's email account and find a message sent by someone named Invisigoth, saying that someone named David is missing. The message contains a BIC code for an intermodal shipping container, which Mulder and Scully locate. When they approach it, a woman uses an electroshock weapon on the agents and attempts to flee, but is captured by Scully. The container turns out to be full of state-of-the-art computer equipment, and the woman is named Invisigoth, who they've been looking for. She warns the agents that a Laser Arms Defense Department satellite has pinpointed their location. They quickly leave the area as the container is destroyed, supposedly by a particle beam shot from a defense satellite. The agents bring Invisigoth to meet the lone gunman, whose real name turns out to be Esther Nan, who tells the agents and the lone gunman that Gelman succeeded in creating an artificial intelligence. She reveals that once the AI locates an enemy, it destroys them using the satellite. According to Esther, Gelman was creating Kill Switch, a virus that would destroy the AI. However, the AI learned of Gelman's plan and killed him by luring the drug dealers and the police to the diner. The only way to destroy the AI is to find the computer on which it is stored. It turns out that David is Esther's friend and also worked with Gelman. Mulder uses a government source to find a secret T3 line in Fairfax County, Virginia, one that the AI uses to log onto the internet. He also finds a trailer that is connected to the T3 line. Meanwhile, Esther forces Scully to drive to David's house at gunpoint. However, they find the house has been destroyed. Esther admits that she and David had been planning to transfer their consciousness into cyberspace to enter the AI. Gelman, however, thought that the idea was too dangerous. Esther also admits that she and David were in love and were having an affair behind Gelman's back. Mulder finds the computer hardware inside the trailer and David's dead body with a virtual reality headset on his head. Mulder is constrained by moving cables and wires and experiences a strange vision in which he is in a hospital where nurses threaten to amputate his limbs unless he reveals Kill Switch's location. Meanwhile, the AI locates Scully and Esther driving near a swing bridge. They become trapped on the bridge after the AI manipulates its drawing mechanism, causing Scully to persuade Esther to throw the computer into the water below. Just as it hits the water, it is destroyed by the defense satellite's laser strike. Scully and Esther arrive at the trailer, in which Mulder is trapped. Esther reveals that she still has the CD on which kill switch is stored. Scully puts it into the CD drive offered by the AI, which then causes it to release Mulder. She gets him out of the trailer, but Esther stays inside. She uses the satellite to locate the trailer's position, causing the missile to destroy the trailer, killing her. Mulder tells Scully that Esther's consciousness probably joined the AI. Later, the lone gunmen get a message on their computer reading "Bite me," something that Esther told Scully earlier. In North Platte of Nebraska, a trailer similar to the one where the AI lived is in a trailer park with automatic security cameras monitoring anyone who comes near.
Thank you.
William Gibson famously didn't know a lot about computers.
Even though he wrote things like Neuromancer.
The hilarious anecdote about Neuromancer is it was written on a typewriter. Absolute bog standard, clunky mechanical typewriter.
Despite being kind of like quintessential cyberpunk.
Yes. Despite, well, being one of the progenitors of the entire genre, yeah, it was written on a complete manual typewriter or an electric typewriter. It wasn't on a computer, which sounds insane, but it's one of those things where technology developed so fast in that time frame that you could start the decade on a typewriter and probably end it typing on a computer into DOS or Word.
Mm.
One of the points is that it's generally considered by a lot of people unfair to sort of critique Gibson's computer literacy, given basically didn't have any. And a lot of his stuff, though, is a cool aesthetic for the fiction rather than anything based in reality. And most of his stuff, up until the 2000s, was always set like 20, 30 years hence, so you could excuse a lot of this.
Okay.
It kind of falls down with Kill Switch, because this is current tech, and this is nonsense.
I got to admit, I think my computer literacy is about on par with William Gibson. I said this back, I think, when we did Ghost in the Machine, is that if you tell me a computer to do something, I'll largely believe it. I like cyberpunk as an aesthetic. I couldn't really judge this episode and how plausible this is, to be honest. It sounds like gibberish, though.
Yeah, there's a lot to criticize, and as some of it is the nuisance, it's almost in the right ballpark. It's little things like that CD that has Twilight Time on it.
Yeah.
So, what they depict on screen isn't implausible.
Okay.
Because this is in the 90s and also on some discs like Dreamcast discs, Sega Dreamcast. You got CD soundtracks.
Okay.
So the point of this was you install the game off the CD and all the data for the game is stored on the first CD track.
Right. That's
copied to the drive. The rest of the track is a regular audio CD. So you can, if you want, put it into a CD player, skip the first track, because the first track just produces modem-style noises, because that's data, and then the rest of it plays like a normal CD.
That's clever.
So when Mulder puts into the CD drive, yeah, that's kind of how it works, but it should basically sort of skip on track 2 should be Twilight Time, and the first track should be data. And there shouldn't be any debate about where the data is. This whole thing about encoding data into the music, you can do it, but you generally don't. Because why would you?
Yeah, true.
So it's a near miss that he's got there, and that's plausible. And uploading consciousness to the internet, we discussed this at the time, this is a popular cyberpunk thing, this is in Neuromancer and a whole lot of other books.
It made me think most of Ghost in the Shell, which is a really excellent animated movie, if you haven't seen it, a Japanese animated movie from the 90s. But that has the same idea with the villain that's kind of has uploaded his brain online and is kind of uploading it into different things.
Yes. Although, of course, it turns out he's not even... it's actually quite similar to this, because Project 2501 is a pure artificial intelligence.
Mm.
There was never a person there to begin with.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's got the same kind of roots, and again, as a cyberpunk story where you have all this impossible tech, it's fine. The X-Files runs into a problem where it's trying to make you believe we can do this with current generation tech.
Yeah.
Like, the VR headset Mulder's trapped into is... You've seen VR from that time period.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing like what that hospital scene is like.
Yeah.
Like, you know, even if you did that as an FMV sequence, it'd be very obvious what was happening.
If you think of, I guess, computer technology at this time, we're looking at original Tomb Raider sort of level graphics.
Yeah, you might get Quake is probably one of the best looking things you could point to. Half-Life was either out or... No, I think Half-Life was just about... was going to come out very shortly, but again, that's your current level of technology and computer rendering.
Mm.
You could do better, obviously, but it would be a lot slower. You wouldn't get it real time like they're trying to pass off in this.
It would have been a different aesthetic in the scene where Scully arrives to kick ass if she looked like original Lara Croft with all the kind of pointy shapes.
Yeah, Scully with the pointy boobs kind of thing.
A fist with no fingers.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing you'd actually get. And again, it's going back to that weird thing of, I think the problem is you've got William Gibson to do this because he, until the 2000s, because he has written modern day set stuff, because he's written like four trilogies of books. This was written right in the middle of the future set stuff. After this, he'd actually do very mundane, very plausible modern day sci-fi.
Okay.
It's a lot closer to what the X-Files aesthetic would have been. So he basically came at this at the wrong point in his career,
Yeah.
I feel, for what you actually wanted out of it.
Apparently it was largely because his 15-year-old daughter was an enormous fan and kind of egged him on for this.
Yeah, and I can see why, if you watch things like Ghost in the Machine and a few other bits and pieces, Wet Wired, you'd come away thinking, yeah, I could get into this.
Yeah.
At the same time, to move a bit more generally, I think this kind of highlights the problem we've been having this season of the guest writers not understanding Modern Scully again. Because Scully feels too skeptical again. She hasn't had 5 seasons worth of development on this ground.
Interestingly, this episode was not as rewritten as heavily as Chinga, as far as I can tell. I think there was a comment on Chris Carter just tweaked it slightly to kind of change a bit how Mordred and Scully reacted to Esther and things like that, just to make it seem a bit more in character.
And I think Scully needed more work because she feels regressive here.
Should probably note before you get too far, I know this episode makes you angry, that at the time that this episode aired, it got overwhelmingly positive reviews. I could find very little negative about this one when I looked into it. It was a huge success. And it was also the most expensive episode of The X-Files ever made.
I don't know if I hate it. I mean, it's impressive it's the most expensive one. It feels really odd given what...
I think my judgment on this one would be unfair, to be honest, because this isn't really my genre. And I remember when I first saw this one as a teenager, didn't really get it, didn't really like it. But this is purely me and kind of plots about computing, to be honest, is my brain just kind of switches off and I just smile and nod a bit.
Which is fair. I mean, I don't think I hate it. It's just, I feel it's tonally not quite right, and what the plot line doesn't belong in the X-Files. I can see why you think it, because you do this in an episode of The Outer Limits, I think you could get away with it.
Yeah, true.
Or The Twilight Zone, you could do this. I don't think you can do it as part of the X-Files. I think that's where you get that weird distinction between The Outer Limits and Twilight Zone and the X-Files, is The Outer Limits and Twilight Zone could basically do whatever they wanted week to week because there's no connection.
Yeah,
the X-Files,
it's an anthology.
Yeah, the X-Files has got some elements of an anthology, but it has to actually work in amongst everything else. I know that this sounds kind of insane when you've got aliens and ghosts and demons and liver mutants and every other cryptid they've ever investigated all at the same time.
That Mexican goat sucker, for example.
Oh, not one of those. I only attacks goats. And God. We can't forget that God has literally intruded into this series at least once.
Yep.
So it feels odd to complain about the sci-fi element, but it doesn't gel for me.
Oh, I think that's a fair reading of it, to be honest. I'm not going to argue with that. I also don't think it feels like an episode of The X-Files. As you say, we've had kind of technology-driven plots before, Ghost in the Machine being the most obvious one, but not a kind of cyberpunky story like this one.
And you made the point that this could have been a follow-up to Ghost in the Machine really well. And the fact it isn't, kind of, I don't know, I'm not going to blame William Gibson for that, because there's a good chance he doesn't know that. Chris Carter should have looked at this and said, hey, we've got this dangling plot thread from season 1.
Yeah, technically the AI did kind of fake its death and escape in Ghost in the Machine.
Yeah. So, I mean, that as a starting point would be fine.
Not to mention the fact that they took the creator hostage, presumably to get him to recreate this.
Yeah. And that's not quite how the episode presents it, but you could have that as a starting point.
You've also got other ones that kind of focus essentially on Ghost in the Machine as well, like Blood, for example. It's decidedly unclear what's going on in Blood, but it's got that kind of same technological element and the communicating through visual units and things like that.
You could have had a loose trilogy of what of this thing that goes to Machine, goes to Blood, goes to kill switch. The other thing, and this is kind of topical, how about that, is the AI stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, AI was sort of first muted in the 50s. And as a concept, you can see where it's coming from. In the 90s, especially William Gibson had a lot of stuff that dealt with AI. Neuromancer and that set of books is extremely dedicated to AI. So is the actual trilogy he was writing at this point in time, which includes Idaru, which is all about basically Hatsune Miku before she existed.
Like a Vocaloid.
Like a Vocaloid, but an AI Vocaloid.
Okay.
Very similar to the one in Macross Plus.
Oh, yeah. I remember Macross.
Although she was also tied to a human ultimately. She wasn't a true AI either.
Mm.
So basically, Idaru, the book that came out just before this episode, is all about, like, basically Hatsune Miku with an AI grafted onto her.
Okay.
And so you can see that as a popular thing at the time. It's kind of ironic then to look at, this was 1998 and we're in 2023, and AI can't do any of that still. Because all the AI stories at the moment are about generating images based on what you feed into it, or generating text based on what you feed into it. The Vocaloids have to have lyrics written for them still. They don't do anything autonomously.
Back at the time this was written, though, Turing machines were really popular and things like that, where you had the idea of creating a computer interface that you could interact with and not realise it was a computer.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm not saying I don't understand the speculation for it. It's just, in hindsight, it's bizarre to see this was postulated at the time as being plausible. 2023, no one has any idea how to do any of this. Uploading your brain to the internet, we don't know how to do that. It's one of these ones where, and I think it's been mooted in other areas, like cryptocurrency space, is as an assumption in some people that if you're good in one area, you can transfer that to somewhere else. So if you're good at computer programming, understanding the biology of the brain must be really easy, because it's basically the same thing, because it's got to be human-computer. And researchers prove that that's not the case.
In university, my degree's in philosophy, and there is a lot of ideas in kind of the philosophy of the mind about how essentially the human is a very sophisticated computer.
Yeah.
So I can see on that basis how you would transfer this idea into sci-fi of the human mind literally is a computer.
Yeah, and from other criticism I've read and other things, as a sci-fi device for a plot, that's fantastic. Try to do this in real world, it falls apart very quickly. Because you don't actually understand biology.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And we've seen that the X-Files plays it fast and loose with biology anyway.
Yeah, and again, it's the whole, I don't know if biologists sort of have this kind of feeling when they encounter most X-Files episodes, and I'm only getting it for the cyberpunk ones.
You know how I feel every time the X-Files tells you about insects?
Yeah, well, yes.
I think everybody has their niche area of expertise that irks them if people misrepresent it.
Yeah, and it's all these people who write for these sci-fi shows don't understand what they're actually tangling with. I know in some shows that's a detriment, because Star Trek, if you understood any of the physics behind warp drive and everything, you'd be going, well, this doesn't make any sense.
There is an element of sci-fi I like, is Arthur C. Clarke used to write that if any technology is suitably advanced, it will appear to be magic. And I think that's where you can get away with sci-fi doing weird things. If it is that advanced, essentially you're writing a fantasy story.
Yeah, well, it also just science fantasy like Star Wars, where it's got a sci-fi aesthetic, but there's no grounding beneath it for how any of it works. You're just doing it because, it looks cool and to make the plot move.
Yeah.
And it's all fine. It depends what you want out of something. It's not really fair to criticize Star Wars for not being scientifically accurate. It is centuries ago in a different galaxy. Who knows?
Long, long ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Everyone forgets, especially a presenter on ITV one time.
Oh, do people assume it's future set?
Well, one guy on ITV did. Because he said, now we'll take you to the future on Christmas Day. It's like, you know the first thing that comes up on screen is a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
I feel you're trying not to talk about this episode.
A little bit. Well, I mean, we're talking about the aesthetic and nature of the episode, but we have got why should Mulder be arrested this week? He stole evidence from a crime scene.
Yep, true. Just nabbed off with the laptop and Twilight Time.
Yeah, and I do think as well, I understand why it's in there, but the repetition of kill switch gets kind of comical towards the end of the episode.
You mean how many times they just utter those two words?
Yeah, it's like, we've got the kill switch. Where's the kill switch? Like, call it something else, please.
Even if we just referred to it as Twilight Time.
It would be something a bit different, yeah. Or you interchange the two of them. But no. It's nice to see the Lone Gunmen again. We've remembered they exist.
Yeah.
We've also remembered...
This is exactly the right plot for the Lone Gunman as well, a techie plot.
It is, and they've also remembered quite well what Unusual Suspects now stated about their origins.
Yep.
Because Byers has a whole load of geeking out. Well, actually, all three of them have a lot of geeking out over Invisigoth herself.
Mm.
Which is cool. How old would you say Invisigoth was?
Late 20s, maybe?
Late 20s. So the time frame feels a little off for her to be that famous in that short span of time, which is a little unfair because some of the famous computer hackers did terrible things when they were teenagers, so it's not impossible that she has this reputation.
She has a really cool aesthetic as well.
She does. I like it. Invisigoth does actually feel like a William Gibson character.
Yeah.
Unsurprisingly. But yes, her looks great. Her name is great. I mean, I know we actually have someone on Twitter called Invisigoth. Hey, now we've realised where she comes from.
Yeah. Yeah, one of our Twitter followers does use that name. It's a fantastic username.
It is a fantastic username. It's much better than Esther Nairn. Poor woman.
I was running that through anagram software to see if I came up with something, but it doesn't seem to be an anagram. It's just a really weird name.
Fair enough. No, I don't think they even know where it comes from.
Yeah, in my head it just didn't sound quite a natural name. I wondered if it was an anagram or there was something clever going on there, but not that I can see.
I do kind of like Scully's very blunt, shall we check his email, when they're trying to figure out Gelman's last moves and everything.
Oh, yeah, them not kind of thinking of the obvious solution.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways you'd sort of say, if he's that paranoid and that kind of reclusive, he probably doesn't use email. There are other ways of doing this, even in 1998.
Especially when we know that this entity or whatever it is can basically track you if you use a mobile phone and things like that.
Yeah, and we should possibly talk about the AI as a malevolent kind of force. I mean, I'm going to set aside their description of how it developed is also bizarre.
They kind of describe its development like it is a biological entity kind of evolving from primordial slime, and I'm pretty sure the internet doesn't work that way, but I'll reserve my judgment for what you're about to say, I think.
No, I'd go with that one. The whole idea of the primordial slime, I mean, you could say it's 4chan at this point, but you probably don't want it reading out of 4chan, do you? I think one of the things about it is how Gibson describes it. Again, we're getting too much into computer kind of criticism, but Gibson also uses cyberspace as a sort of simulated space you move through, and to look at anything, you have to move to it and then interact with it.
Yeah,
which is how you get that cool effect in things like Johnny Mnemonic, and it's how the Matrix works to a point as well.
I'm just thinking Wreck-It Ralph now as well.
Wreck-It Ralph, but Wreck-It Ralph breaks the internet. Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
and this is a common thing through all his books. And when you're a computer literate, you look at this and go, "This is an awful way to interact with these things." Because in one of his books, even has to go to a website, you've got to go through this long corridor, which is kind of a loading screen, and there's all this kind of dark decor. It's a case of, you're going to log off and say, "I don't care. Just give me the page. I want the page and the information on it. I don't want this long build-up." But for aesthetic purposes, that's what you do.
Have you ever seen the second Unfriended movie? The ones that are kind of filmed over Skype?
I watched bits of that one, I think.
In the second one, they accidentally managed to access the dark web.
Yeah.
And their interface for accessing the dark web is this kind of image appears on their... that fills their screen with them on a boat kind of going through an underground waterway to get to it and things like that. It's that sort of aesthetic that gives you the idea of you're moving to this kind of physical space.
The thing is, to access the dark web is really simple, and I don't think that's why people don't do it much, is because the distinction is negligible.
Yeah, I researched that after Unfriended, to be honest. It's like, is it really this complicated? No, I was amazed by actually how simple it is if you were of the mind to want to be on the dark web.
You download Tor, get the Tor browser or something, it will connect you via the different rate you do this, and you're in.
Yeah, the lack of the kind of tunnels and boats and waterways is quite disappointing.
You need to know where it is. The point I was going for, though, is this whole thing of, they let the AI out into the internet to go and roam.
Mm.
And that's more in keeping with William Gibson's idea of neuromancer and moving around cyberspace. In practical internet terms, you're saying, so the AI copied itself from the current directory to a remote directory, deleted itself from the current one, and then copied itself back again.
Yep.
Because that's the only way this is kind of like teleporters in Star Trek. And the thing that no one thinks about is, to do teleportation in the real world, you have to be destroyed as you're teleported. This is the prestige.
Spoilers, but yeah.
Spoilers. It's an old film at this point. I think we're
And an
okay.
older book.
And
yeah.
an older book.
But yeah, that's the idea of the Prestige.
Is to do this thing, you have to die one way or another. The thing the Star Trek teleporters do that some others don't is basically Star Trek teleporters destroy the copy that is left standing on the teleport pad. Letting the AI out to roam and everything is one of those, it sounds okay in principle, but is actually kind of weird. And the idea probably comes from viruses, because you got the whole idea of viruses spreading. But viruses don't kind of leave the place they spread from. They stay where they go and then
just
spread.
grow out from it.
Yeah. The AI in Malevolent Force, though, I think some of it's good and some of it's bad, because it's like, the taking control of satellite, I can buy that. Taking control of a swing bridge is a bit difficult for me, because those are usually, you don't do it remotely, you usually have someone at the bridge to operate them.
Yeah, it's not going to be done via the internet.
No, so how it's doing this, I don't know.
I think one of the more memorable things about the episode is the bit with Mulder in virtual reality in the kind of Jacob's Ladder hospital. I did see a great commentary from both of them in this, as Gillian Anderson loved this sequence because she got to, look awesome doing karate, beating up these nurses. But the script then called for Mulder to look impressed at her karate, and David Duchovny didn't think this was a realistic response because he said, "I've just lost both my arms, why would I be impressed by Scully's karate?" It's a really, really valid point.
It is. I do kind of like the kind of weird comedy of just the whole, tell us what kill switch is, or we might have to take your arm off. Oh, we've cut off one of your arms.
It's the way she words it as well. There's a bit where she kind of portrays the Doctor as being benevolent because he's let Mulder keep his legs and stuff like that. It's quite a shocking scene when you first see it because, of course, you don't initially realise it's virtual reality.
No.
But you quickly become apparent, it's like, all right, yeah, we're not going to have Mulder become kind of quadriplegic over the course of this plot.
Honestly, it turns out to be like the guy in the walk. That's how Mulder's going to do it from now on.
Yeah.
I do think having the AI is a bit weird, though, because it's where it's got this RV parked in the middle of this field with a very visible cable running to it. And there's that abandoned house next to it. As you said as well, who's putting these RVs into place? Because they're jam-packed full of computer equipment.
You could argue that the first one was put into place by David before he hooked himself into it.
You could.
The one at the end of the episode, I'm not sure who are new external forces putting these RVs together. I guess you've got to assume that he set up numerous ones ahead of time in case something bad happened to one of them.
You at this point, you're sort of saying, and you have how much money?
All
the money. But yeah, it's one of those things where AI stuff falls down, where you've got it has limits to what it can do to you.
I was kind of disappointed that we didn't get more into the ethics of this episode, because essentially David and Esther always had their intention to upload their conscious to the AI and become one kind of gestalt entity, but they just say an offhand thing, but Donald forbade us to do it. So I think we need to get more into the ethics of why didn't Donald want you to do this and all the rest of it. What was the issue?
And what is now the implications that we now apparently have a merged AI and Esther and David.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Because she's communicating with Lone Goodman. We know she's still alive.
And also you think it would have more of an effect because essentially Mulder has touched this. He's kind of been temporarily put into the network as well, but there's no kind of lasting ramification there.
Now, also that those missile, the disintegrated beam blows up buildings, but also vaporizes people, apparently. They don't find any bodies afterwards, do they?
No, true. That sound effect when it powers up as well is a bit like the Wilhelm scream. Apparently it's a common sound effect that you hear through sci-fi. It's kind of that swoosh noise is, most famously, it's the noise that the Predator's shoulder gun makes.
Ah.
And also I think a lot of sound effects in Doom are kind of made from it as well.
Surprised me. I mean, like, you hear the Doom door sound in various places as well. It's like one of these stock things.
You're still desperately trying not to talk about this episode.
I'm trying to... I think one of the problems with it is it's one of these, there's not actually much to it, is there?
No, ultimately
it's very thin.
It feels like there should be more to this episode because it's quite fast-paced.
Very much a case of Mulder and Scully called into mystery. And then immediately they move off into separate directions and Scully gets captured at gunpoint really easily in a way that feels wrong.
Yeah, I've said before that I think The X-Files is at its best when it has a kind of procedural format, and this one doesn't have it. It has some nice aspects as well, and I like the kind of more philosophical edge to it. So at the end of the episode, Mulder has a nice line where he says, "What are we but electrical impulses?" And I like it when you're kind of being more abstract like that. It's like kind of Carl Sagan's sort of philosophical physics. It's just a really nice image. And, essentially true as well.
Yes, and how it's all, and that leads into how you think imply this is all plausible. I realise I think I know what part of my problem with the episode is Scully.
Okay.
And the fact that she's basically out of character and doesn't get to do much.
No, she basically is chauffeuring Invisigoth around.
Yeah, it's like she gets a cool action sequence, but that's not actually her.
Yeah. In terms of action as well, and again, it's not totally in keeping with the X-Files, this is more like a Hollywood movie, this episode. You get, a lot of fast-paced scenes, a lot of explosions, Scully doing karate, even though it's just virtual reality Scully, and kicking ass. It's a very, very fast-paced, very exciting, very cinematic episode, which is in keeping with the fact that, as I previously said, it's the most expensive of the X-Files episodes to produce.
I think that's a good part of it.
Interestingly, it was also one of the ones where they had a lot of hard time getting these permissions to film these scenes. It's the scene where they blew up the shipping container. Was originally supposed to be filmed at some dock somewhere, but when they realised what they were doing, they revoked their permissions to do it. It wound up being shot near an airport and caused a massive shockwave, which lodged them a lot of complaints from people living nearby. And similarly, even the scene where they threw the laptop into the river took almost a month for them to get permissions just to throw stuff into the river because it's such a protected area. So this episode just seemed to cause no end of problems and budget issues.
It seems really weird, ultimately, for what you get out of it.
You're talking about Scully being out of character.
Some of it, I think, it's got to be coming after Chinga.
Hmm.
Because in Chinga, it's not clear ultimately how much of it she believed, but she certainly witnessed enough weird stuff in that. And it's also a meticulous list of all the black magic stuff as well, when Mulder kind of prompts her that she might not know what she's looking for.
Yeah.
To then go straight to Kill Switch, where it's a case of, no, I don't believe any of this, and then protesting up until the 2/3 mark, where she's actually fully on board abruptly. After being not even convinced by Invisigoth so much as basically Invisigoth gives up. We do have Scully not being so much of a stickler for rules, because she probably should have arrested Invisigoth for taking her gun.
And holding her hostage. It's not until Invisigoth believes that David has been killed that she kind of gives herself up.
Yeah. I like Invisigoth's look and her name, obviously. Her character feels a bit too, I don't know, bipolar. As in, she's one way up until the revelation of death, and then she's basically much nicer to everyone immediately afterwards.
Yeah, true. It's a shame because she is really cool.
She is, but it's one of those aesthetic cool things rather than she's actually a good character.
Yeah, she doesn't really do enough to make a judgment on whether or not she's a strong character.
No, and I mean, imagine that could be part of the problem. Again, if you'd shifted the focus so Invisigoth was more central to everything, you'd have a better character and possibly a better story. I don't know.
I think it's from a writing perspective as well, and it's a problem that often happens when men are writing female characters, is Invisigoth seems to have agency at the start. She seems strong, you don't know exactly what she's doing, but some kind of military-grade AI is targeting her and trying to kill her. But ultimately, it turns out that her motivation is just love.
Yes.
At the end of it, is she just wants to be with this guy she loves and wants to make sure this guy's okay, and that's her involvement in the plot.
That's very true. So yeah, she helped create it, but that's not her goal anymore.
It's something you don't see as much today because we're a lot more conscious about how we write women, but particularly back then, and it's particularly male writers, is women's goals become things like children, loving a man, weddings, things like that. Things that are stereotypically feminine things. So even if you are a cool computer hacker, eventually it boils down to being in love with a guy.
Yeah, that's a completely valid criticism of her. I've realised the other thing I was going to bring up is, so the start of the episode, the sting, is really good. This synthesized voice, which is plausibly lifelike enough, rings up all the different drug dealers and says, the one person you're looking for is in this diner.
Yeah.
To get them all together, and basically waits until something sets them all off so they'll kill the guy.
I thought it was quite fun.
It is. I think my objection to it is, it never does anything like that again.
No.
And basically, given its behaviour later on, why did it not shoot the diner? Because it knows exactly where he is.
And could have just vaporized it, yeah.
So I think that's part of my problem with the episode is you've got a great weird setup that you immediately discard in favour of satellites would blow up whatever you want from orbit. And you could have just one or the other. You've got to pick one. And they don't. So it would be nice to see the AI do more weird stuff like that. Just put obstacles in the way by calling in unconventional obstacles that you wouldn't think of, but doing it en masse so it becomes a real problem.
I'm going to uncite Unfriended 2 here and just spoil the movie slightly. There is a death within the movie where essentially using computer technologies and hacking, they convince the police that there is an armed terrorist in the basement when it's one of the major characters. So the police come in all guns blaring and kill him. But again, it's through them hacking his computer, and when the police at the door playing various order cues so the police think they hear a gun cocking and things like that. So you've got that idea of using technology to set up a murder.
So semi-alarmingly, this is real. This happens. It's called swatting. The real-world examples, though, are actually worse than Unfriended, because you don't even need to fake the sounds inside the house. The SWAT team will barge down the door.
Yeah, but this was to guarantee that someone will be killed in this raid. Swatting raids, often, people are forced to lie on the ground for a bit and then they discover it's all a hoax. There's a very famous case with a YouTuber who's had several swatting raids called on her house because some jerk on the internet thinks it's funny.
There's a wider discussion about whether militarized police is a good idea at all and whether SWAT should be a thing, and you couldn't have escalated this in a different way. That's for a different podcast. And you can understand the AI making use of this for that kind of thing. And it doesn't. It just blows things up from orbit. Which is very cool and very Akira, but do we have anything else for this?
No, I think I ran out of things to say some time ago, to be honest.
And you accused me of not wanting to talk about this episode. Okay. Would you like a trip to Texas?
I would indeed.
Okay.
I've been looking forward to this one for a while.
Haven't we both? So we also have Bad Blood, which is directed by Cliff Bowl, written by Vince Gilligan, and first broadcast on the 22nd of February 1998. Guest stars. Well, there's one really famous one, though it's before he became famous again.
Luke Wilson?
Luke Wilson as Sheriff Hartwell. So, one of his first credits in 1998 is for Scream 2.
Yeah, of course.
Because he's in the Stab movie.
Yeah, he is.
This is around the same time this episode was filmed. And it's basically, that's right near the start of his career.
Oh, right.
So, but the whole thing of Excel's not getting big actors in, he wasn't hired because he was a known person. He was hired for his looks.
I believe he'd previously worked with Vince Gilligan on something, is why he was hired.
That probably works as well, but he wasn't a known quantity at the time. Since then, of course, he's been in Charlie's Angels and Charlie's Angels 2, Legally Blonde and Legally Blonde 2, The Royal Tenenbaums, Anchorman, and Zombieland Double Tap.
Great in Zombieland.
And he's great, but he's not been in much. We have Patrick Renner as Ronnie Strickland, who was in Recess, School's Out,
Aww.
ER, and Glow.
Okay.
Brent Butt was the coroner, who was in Millennium, and also in an episode of Kids in the Hall. But then we have Forbes Angus, who played the funeral director, who is an X-Files mainstay.
I thought I recognised him.
He's been in Shadows, Soft Light, Blessing Way, and Small Potatoes.
Oh, wow.
He was the security guard that Mulder handcuffed to the ambulance driver in Small Potatoes.
Okay, yeah.
That's what we saw most recently. So, would you like to tell us how you remember Bad Blood?
It might be different how you remember it, of course.
It might.
In our opening sting, which is set in Cheney, Texas, we see Mulder killing a young man who he believes to be a vampire, staking him rather violently through the heart. As Scully catches up with him, she points out the fact that he doesn't actually have fangs, he's actually wearing dentures, and so Mulder has just murdered a teenager. Afterwards, Mulder and Scully have to report their version of events to Assistant Director Walter Skinner. Before they do so, Mulder suggests they get their stories straight. Scully goes first, telling her version via a flashback of the previous day. She arrived at work to find Mulder very exuberant about a series of cattle mutilations that took place in Texas, in which the cows were drained entirely of blood. He then mentions in passing that there was also one human killed. Mulder, of course, believes this to be the work of vampires. In this version, we see Mulder as being overexcitable, but also deeply insensitive and incredibly annoying, while Scully portrays herself as being calm, mindful, and very, very meticulous in her process. They then travel to Cheney, where they meet Sheriff Hartwell, whom Scully immediately finds highly handsome and charming. Mulder and Hartwell leave to investigate the local cemetery while Scully does an autopsy on the body. She doesn't really discover that much, but finds that the victim's last meal had been pizza and that he had been incapacitated with chloral hydrate. She then returns to their motel room, exhausted, and orders a pizza for herself. But Mulder immediately appears, and before she can even have her pizza, sends her back to autopsy another body that he's found. She leaves him just as her food arrives, and we see that it is Ronnie, the boy that Mulder killed in the opening sting, who is delivering it. When Scully autopsies the second victim, she discovers that he has also ingested chloral hydrate in a pizza, and therefore realises that Mulder must be in danger. When she returns to the motel room, she finds Mulder about to be attacked by the pizza delivery boy. She shoots at Ronnie, who legs it off into the woods. As she catches up with him, she finds Mulder has gotten there first, even though she thought he was drugged and unable to move, and has already hammered a stake through Ronnie's heart. Mulder refutes this chain of events and instead tells his own version. In Mulder's eyes, he is sensitive and polite and deeply respectful to Scully, while she is dismissive and irritable from the start, even when he explains to her about the series of murders. While Scully is clearly enamoured with Sheriff Hartwell, Mulder portrays him as being kind of idiotic, backwoods, and having obvious bucked teeth. While Scully is performing the autopsy, we this time follow Mulder and Hartwell as they go to the local cemetery, where Mulder tells a very receptive Hartwell about different sorts of vampire. They are then called to a local RV park where there has been a situation. They find a mobile home circling endlessly, and we see Mulder make a bit of a fool of himself as he tries to get it to stop. Inside the mobile home, there is another dead body, who apparently has also been a victim of the same attacker. Mulder returns to the motel room, and after sending Scully back to autopsy this new body, he eats a pizza and immediately realises he's been drugged. Ronnie enters the room with glowing green eyes and fangs and prepares to attack Mulder. However, Mulder manages to hold him off by scattering sunflower seeds all over the floor. Mulder previously illustrated to the sheriff that vampires are obsessively compulsive, and that means that Ronnie cannot proceed until he has picked up every single one. Scully enters and shoots Ronnie. Mulder sees the bullets actually hit him several times in the chest but seem to have no effect, and Ronnie runs out with Scully in pursuit. Mulder recovers from being drugged and chases afterwards. As we return back to the present day, Scully points out that no one is going to believe Mulder because of their diverging statements and the fact that Ronnie has been proven to be human. Meanwhile, back in Texas, we see a coroner preparing to autopsy Ronnie's body. As soon as he removes the stake, Ronnie wakes up, gnaws on the guy's neck, and then escapes. Skinner, of course, sends Mulder and Scully immediately back to Texas to investigate. Scully stakes out the cemetery with Sheriff Hartwell, while Mulder goes to the RV park. As they wait, Hartwell gives Scully a hot drink, which turns out to be drugged, and before she loses consciousness, apologises to her on behalf of Ronnie and says that it's making them all look bad, revealing that he too is a vampire. As Scully loses consciousness, she sees Sheriff Hartwell's eyes beginning to glow. Meanwhile, at the RV park, Mulder finds Ronnie. He tries to arrest him, but is surrounded and overwhelmed by a group of people, all of whom are clearly vampires. He wakes up the next morning in the RV park inside his car and is rejoined by Scully. They are both unharmed, and in the meantime the vampires have moved the entire trailer park and disappeared. Back in Washington, they have to give their unified report to Skinner, who is absolutely confused by what he has been told.
Thank you. Shall we start with the problems people had with this episode?
Before we get onto the fact that it is great. Again, response for this episode was overwhelmingly positive, but there were a couple of negative criticisms at the time it was released, and I actually do think they are wholly fair. It's credit where credit due. Bad Blood is often cited as being one of, if not the best episode of The X-Files, though I will cite again that I wouldn't consider this to be a good stepping on point. It's one that works if you understand The X-Files to begin with.
Yeah, you have to know both characters. So, one comment was the one I made to you yesterday, and I completely blanked on the other one, the actual criticism, but it does make sense, of Scully is bizarrely unfazed by Mulder killing someone in front of her.
A teenage boy, nonetheless.
A teenage boy.
And also, Mulder shows no remorse for killing a teenage boy.
Yes, and then kicks a bin to death when he should be wrangling with conflict over doing this. What was the other criticism, though? 'Cause I think there are two.
The other criticism is that people didn't, well, one critic in particular, did not like the way that Mulder and Scully play off each other in this, because we kind of see into their heads and their insecurities, and they both come off as being a bit passive-aggressive towards each other, which, again, I think is a fair commentary, it does show the cracks in the relationship here.
Yeah, and they're normally, well, we've got to take every other episode as kind of being the neutral third point. They're not actually like either of these. They're very much a median.
But it's showing the way they view each other, as Mulder really does view Scully as being this kind of rude and dismissive, and Scully showing him as being kind of just annoying.
Yeah, well, I think it's like been known from a few other comedy episodes. You basically have to say this doesn't form part of the continuity because it causes problems.
Yeah, I think a lot of the comedy episodes you have to take as kind of being non-canonical.
Yeah.
An episode like this doesn't fit in, though it does make reference to El Mundo Guerra.
It does.
Therefore we do have some continuity in there.
Yeah, but with criticism out the way, and the Mulder and Scully not being concerned is a hallmark of the fact we're doing this as a comedy, because it's very difficult to work around that.
It's another episode like Jose Chung that kind of works on the Rashomon model of not being sure exactly what happened because we're getting very differing accounts of events.
Yeah, and the difference between their stories, I think the AV Club's review of this is fascinating because they don't disagree on events at all. They agree on the details is what's wrong between the two versions.
Yeah.
And obviously they can't comment on the bits they're not present for, but any present event where they're together, it's the attitude, it's what people are saying to each other, its tone of voice is what's shifting each time.
Yeah. And things like the cute little portrayals of Luke Wilson kind of transforming between a kind of hillbilly-ish character, stereotypical sort of hillbilly-ish character, to an absolute heartthrob between the versions.
Yeah, and I do like Scully's moony-eyed thing, where it's goes up, he did not call you Dana. He did not know your first name. Scully in the sheriff's shop talk while Mulder's just looking increasingly bored in the background.
I think one of my favourite scenes in the episode are the two different versions of the debriefing at the start.
Everyone loves the two different versions. It's just, there's such a contrast.
It's things like Mulder excitedly showing all the dead cow pictures versus his version of events where he's really apologetic and scrolling through them while she's rolling her eyes.
There's also, dead cow, we got a 200 words, and a dead tourist. And then he just runs out of the office and calls back.
Yeah. There's a Scully dismissive of Scully asking if it could be Chupacabra and kind of being dismissed by Mulder versus it better not be that Mexican goat thing, goat sucker or whatever she says.
I like this idea of Mulder being actually kind of hard to work with. And this one's actually weirdly consistent, is things like the shoelaces. Either version, he doesn't explain what that means at the time. So, as much as he's portraying himself in a good light, yeah, even he isn't going to stop and explain it to someone who doesn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mulder, you're kind of a jerk, really. But I like, it's little things like, to have a cemetery that's out of the way, the creepier the better. And I like just the little details, like, it's got to be weird for a vampire to have someone explain vampire lore to you. And then Mulder gets so many things right, like, the vampire will come by here. He's being drawn to this place, and Ronnie drives up. I think my favourite bit of the episode, really, there's a few bits, but it's the sunflower seeds when Ronnie bursts into the room. Just Mulder throws the sunflower seeds, just why'd you have to do that? You're in so much trouble.
I do like the general idea of it, and the synopsis didn't really get it across, I apologise, of Ronnie's characterisation in this, of he is a true vampire, but he's kind of become enamoured by, like, the Bela Lugosi kind of vampire and is playing this up to the Hollywood stereotype.
Yeah, and it's interesting that Scully cracks the case in, like, minute 10, where she just says, maybe he's just a vampire fanboy. It's like, absolutely.
He just happens to be a vampire.
But they're not like he wants them to be.
Yeah. It's a great idea, and I like it as the counterpart. I've referred to a lot of X-Files episodes as being vampire episodes, but only this and 3 are the true vampire ones. And compare this to 3, and which one would you rather watch?
I'd watch this one over and over again, really. I mean, it helps it's a comedy episode as well, and this is very much a tone lightening thing.
We've said already that Vince Gilligan, other than Darren Morgan, is the other one who kind of writes comedy really well in the X-Files.
Yeah. He does seem to understand what he's doing, and it's hard not to see this as kind of a tribute to Jose Chung. I don't think it's actually mentioned anywhere, but given Jose Chung was very much the Rashomon episode, And this works this is a more limited Rashomon trick, but it's very much the same kind of idea.
We did mention it back in the Jose Chung, but Rashomon is a movie from the 1950s by Akira Kurosawa that is exceptionally good, and I would recommend it, but it's basically framed around there being the murder of a samurai and kind of accounts of people who witnessed parts or the whole in the end of this murder differing and trying to figure out what the true sequence of events is from some of these wildly different stories about it.
And the ultimate point is that can the truth ever be known? And if it can't be known, what does that say about everything?
Yeah.
It's just good stuff. Just the whole idea of a modern day cryptid that basically is figured out the best way to operate is keep quiet, don't rock the boat, live your life normally, and people will leave you alone. And then you've got the vampire fanboy, who I think it's actually kind of surprised that they don't just kill him. They actually are protective of Ronnie, despite the fact he's brought all this down upon them.
Yeah.
And they happen to draw the attention of Fox Mulder, the person you don't want to come and investigate in this.
I read a production comment about it where when Ronnie's actor read the script, he went to the showrunners and said, is Ronnie just pretending to be a moron? And they respond, no, he is a moron. But that's just the portrayal, is Ronnie is like their kind of like idiot kid brother, and they're still really protective of him, but it's just that, Ronnie's done this again sort of attitude.
As a character, and he doesn't get that much screen time, but he's doing it really well. I mean, he's great as the disaffected, kind of just oblivious teen. But when he's doing the vampire mode stuff, though, it's not so much scary, it's actually still funny.
Yeah.
And it builds up to that great moment in the morgue where the morgue, he's doing the whole sort of glaring and snarling at the morgue guy. Then we get Skinner's report of, the morgue, the coroner's been attacked. The coroner's dead? No, he's been bitten, kind of knocked on.
It's very cute.
And Scully's prepared defense for Mulder is he was drugged. Just don't forget you were drugged.
And ultimately she says the same thing about, I'm sorry, sir, I was drugged.
And just weirdness like Scully having Mulder sing the Shaft theme song for some reason.
I did not.
I would say, ultimately, this is kind of the problem with this episode, is you basically get into a whole, I like this bit, this bit, this bit, and it's just a litany of all the nice moments from the episode.
It's just a really nice and a really wholesome episode, ultimately, as well.
Yes, despite the whole Mulder and Scully seeming to be at each other's throats at the start, or treating each other in this really disdainful way, ultimately.
Yeah.
They still work together. There's still a load of camaraderie when they meet up at the end. Because it's things like Scully's just sort of lets Mulder look at her neck with like no protest or anything. She knows exactly what he's looking for.
I've always cited Clyde Bruckman as my favourite comedy episode of The X-Files, and that remains unchanged after this. But at the same time, is a lot of the comedy episodes either end in a slightly sad way or a slightly dissatisfying way. This episode's quite wholesome, comparatively. It's not dark like Home, it's not dark like Clyde Bruckman. Even Jose Chung kind of has this kind of vague, slightly unsatisfying ending to it.
Melancholy, I would say.
Yeah, melancholic is the word I'm looking for. But this one's just nice. I know a couple of people and a lot of cows do die over the course of the episode, but it just, it wraps up nicely. It feels complete. The vampires aren't monstrous. They're just trying to kind of hide in plain sight. It's just Ronnie kind of messing everything up for them.
Yeah, and I think that's the other aspect is the vampires escape at the end. You don't feel them as a threat, again, because they've ingratiated themselves into the modern world. They know what they need to do to get by and not draw attention to themselves.
Yeah.
I'd say one of the weirdest problems with the episode, then, apart from the whole Mulder and Scully don't care that they've killed someone, again, and for worse reasons than they've killed anyone else to date.
And Mulder still hasn't been sacked. I guess only the fact that we have evidence that Ronnie got up and walked away afterwards has saved him.
If he hadn't attacked if Ronnie hadn't attacked the coroner, Mulder probably would have actually not survived this.
Got a question as well, is how many times we've seen Scully talking to the FBI psychiatrist and Mulder never gets sent there.
Yeah, he probably should do. There is a weird structural weakness in the episode, and I don't really want to pick at it too much because it's part of why the episode works, but the FBI is being sued for $446 million.
Mm-hmm.
This crime happened yesterday. I'm pretty sure, even with the best one in the world and the fastest you could do, you can't sue someone that fast.
Good point, yep.
And also, as alluded to at the end of the episode, Ronnie's relatives, who are suing the FBI for $446 million, are from the RV park, which means they're the vampires who know pretty well that Ronnie can't be dead. And I'm guessing the original plan had Mulder and Scully not go out to Texas if someone hadn't pulled the stake out, is they would go to the grave afterwards, let her out, and no one would be any the wiser. It's like, it's an annoying thing where the framing of the episode, if you look at it too closely, has other questions, but it's set up for so many other good things you don't want to. Because none of the rest of it works if you're going to take the death seriously, and none of it works if you're going to take the lawsuit seriously.
Apparently the entire inspiration for this episode actually came from an episode of The Dick Van Dyke Show. And it is, as you expect, it's an episode where Rob and Laura have a falling out, and therefore they both recount this series of events that kind of occur differently. And Vince Gilligan saw this episode, and he saw it actually substantially earlier in the series, but couldn't figure out a way to kind of make this work exactly.
Okay.
The original idea was that he was going to frame it as an episode of Unexplained Mysteries, I think. So have a kind of vague crossover with that. But he couldn't quite figure out how to get this episode into the Unexplained Mysteries format.
I mean, I can definitely buy that for being, and when the FBI agents woke up the next morning, the RV park was empty. Were they all vampires? Tune in next week as we discuss whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely you can see the lingering aspects of that still in there.
Yeah. I like the structure. I like that we've kept the plot simple as well, because you take up so much of the episode showing the two different versions of events, which we've also kept different enough because Mulder and Scully aren't together a lot of it, that it's not repetition.
Yeah.
But also that means that we've only got 10 minutes of the episode at the end to wrap this up, so you couldn't have had anything more complicated than we've got, really.
Indeed. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I would agree. I like the fact it is sort of simplistic, and you get the contrasting events and you get the separate events, and neither of them look great in the separate events either. They kind of, honest, they're not doing the best thing, and then you come back together again. But it's one of those, Jose Chung was hugely more complicated, but didn't have quite the same Rashomon thing going for it, because it was only like a few events were sort of contrasted both ways. Whereas this is making you clear the whole first act basically is repeated twice.
Yeah.
And all that changes is the details.
Yeah.
And that makes it funny, admittedly.
And ultimately, my biggest problem with the episode is that Scully has done how many autopsies now and apparently doesn't know what a large intestine looks like.
She's very, very tired.
She shouldn't be for the first one.
I think it's the second one, actually, is when it happens.
Both times.
It's both times, okay. We could tell who's not done biology stuff then, can't we, Gillian Anderson? Or Vince Gilligan, or both. Or the props department. Actually, the props department more than anything else.
Yeah. Oh, come on, guys. Scully's supposed to be a medical doctor, and now I'm even more concerned about her medical degree than ever before.
I do like, I mean, even within Scully's half of it, it's like the contrast of the two autopsies. With the first one, she's doing it kind of seriously. The second one's just heart, thunk, lungs, thunk, large intestine, thunk. It's slowly sort of...
Yeah, I like it kind of unspooling down the side.
And just the whole sort of, they're very weary,
I like it when she's doing the kind of stomach contents bit as well.
And comes to the conclusion, pizza's a good idea.
Yeah. It's like, oh, that sounds really good, or whatever she says. But
this has precedent. Our town, she did all that stuff about the chicken stuff, and she still bought herself a giant chicken bucket.
I believe that was after she saw somebody fall into a meat grinder at a chicken plant as well. There's a Red Museum where she has the ribs as well.
It's, Scully, what are you doing?
I do like that clinical detachment that you can do. It's the most gruesome sequence in the episode as well, the autopsy.
Yeah.
You can kind of cut a person's body open and it just makes you hungry. But as you said, it's just a linked episode of really, really nice sequences.
Yeah. One point, possibly, is did the funeral director give the game away almost at the start?
Yeah, pretty much immediately.
Because it's the offhand joke of, why do you have so many caskets for such a small town? Oh, repeat business. Is that actually a joke, or is that actually what's going on? Because I don't think they ever resolve that.
No.
But I'm going to suspect that might be what's happening.
One of the most interesting things I thought when I was looking into this episode is that all the effects are practical.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, the glowing eyes I thought would have been added post, but actually it's just some kind of phosphorant material that's been painted on their eyelids.
Yeah.
To give that effect of the kind of glowing green irises, which actually looks pretty nice for an X-Files special effect.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's noticeably inhuman and everything, so that actually works. I am wondering if the rest of the town sleeps in coffins, or it's just Ronnie is sort of really committed to the bit. It's not clear.
No, you can buy that it's just Ronnie committed to the bit, to be fair.
But again, all the caskets, that kind of then implies that maybe the town is buying new caskets. It's like buying a new home.
Yeah. Or a bed.
Or a bed. Oh, sorry, bed, yeah. So basically you've worn out the cushioning of this one, so you're going to buy a new one.
Mm.
You could go either way. I mean, it's not clear. Because I think that's probably one of the other strengths is the vampires sort of say, the sheriff says, we pay taxes, we do all the normal stuff. He didn't actually say which bits of Ronnie's behaviour are the aberrant one.
Yeah.
It's very much left ambiguous.
And Mulder himself says that, like, every culture has a vampire myth, but they're all a bit different.
Yeah, with the obsessive compulsion bit being the one consistent one.
Yeah.
Although, I don't remember that in Dracula so much.
No, but Dracula is what kind of gives us the image of the vampire as we see it now, of the refined person who kind of can't go out during the day and has long fangs.
That's made me think of two things. There's one of Ronnie was very deliberately cast to be a schlubby teenager and not Bela Lugosi.
Mm. It should be noted as well that it's specifically the Bela Lugosi idea of Dracula. It's not Dracula as he appears in the book again, which is quite different. The Bram Stoker novel.
Do you remember, I don't think it's in John Homicide or Maniac, I think it's in the Squee comic, of the guy who wants to be a vampire?
Yes, I do.
And he gets bitten by the vampire, and the whole elegant transformation doesn't happen, and he's got the weird curly fangs, smells of cabbage, and has a massive forehead.
Yeah.
And the fact he says, oh, it'll take hundreds of years for you to attain his beauty, and hundreds of years later, he looks exactly the same.
Yeah.
So I think it's that kind of mindset as well of, yeah, vampires aren't going to necessarily be what you think they are.
Yeah.
And I think that's an aspect of it. And yeah, they are just mundane people who are trying to keep to themselves.
Yeah.
Not rock the boat. Because then people turn up with stakes. I like Mulder's practicality of just breaking this chair in a hotel room. And I mean, it's also, the sting is really good because you don't know what you're looking at. Because it's a case of someone fleeing in terror through the woods, figure chasing after him, and it goes, oh, okay, so what's going to be this week? This is kind of more like a police procedural. And it's not until you actually see it's Mulder who's been hammering the stake into someone. Going, wait a minute.
And then the way Scully just removes the kind of dentures and looks at him.
It's the perfect timing of it. Just sort of tapping the teeth. Oh.
It should be noted that Gillian Anderson considers this one of the best episodes too, and I'm with her.
I think it helps. I mean, it must be as well, from an actor's point of view, the fact you have to do it these two radically different ways. You've got to do the exact same scene twice, and once is, and the other is aggressive, sort of just, well, I don't want to do any of this, I want to stay here. God damn it, Mulder, this is too much effort.
Better not be that Mexican goat sucker.
I think that the strength of it is, it's not a true reflection of either of them. You can see where those aspects have been drawn from and how they've been exaggerated.
Mm. In both sides as well.
In both sides.
It's not the Darren Morgan favourings of Scully this time. You see both of their negative traits kind of lampooned.
Yeah, and Scully is exhibiting like the worst bits of her skepticism writing, which even brought up in Killswitch as well, just one episode ago, where you've got this, she feels out of step with how she should be at this point in time.
And you have aggressive, dismissive Mulder, a bit like we saw in the likes of Never Again.
Yeah. And we hope to never see again. Except in this context. This context is fine. Just because I do like, again, you made that point about the embarrassment of the slideshow. In Mulder's version, he's embarrassed he's put the slides in this order, presuming he hadn't a point to do here. But then, in Scully's version of it, Mulder's a madman who has put 6 dead cows before a dead human. And apparently he thinks this is fine.
And he's more excited about the cows.
Yeah.
It's like 6 exsanguinated cows and this guy.
Yeah.
As the afterthought.
So you're going to come do an autopsy.
And also, the dismissal of Scully as well is that Mulder, as we've commented in episodes before, as Scully sometimes gets sidelined, is it makes an effort of showing this in the Mulder's rushing around and investigating and seeing things, and he just keeps shoving Scully into the autopsy room.
Yeah. And as you say, yeah, the fact that you've got such an two elaborate autopsies to actually give her something to do and show her doing something for a change.
Mm.
It's a nice, actual even handing between the two of them.
Yeah.
Do we have anything else, or should we just keep on saying about the favourite bits? I think we've covered a lot of the episode.
I think we've actually covered a lot of the episode, but yeah, it's definitely recommended, but I'd say only if you've kind of got a good grounding in the X-Files to begin with. You need to understand why it's funny.
Yeah, I think basically you need to have gone through 5 seasons to get to this point, really.
Yeah.
And you made a wider point of why the comedy episodes kind of shouldn't be considered the best episodes because they do rely entirely on the context of everything that's built up to them. Especially Darren Morgan stuff aren't as funny if you watch them in isolation. You need to know how these people behave to get to this point.
I think I might have said it before, but my blog, which I really should put more effort into of late, before we started doing this podcast, a few months before, I did 2 posts on my blog where I talked about my favourite episodes of the X-Files, and I split out the comedy ones because I didn't think it was fair to do a top 10 X-Files and then dominate it with the comedy episodes, which we remember because they're great, but they're not really indicative of the X-Files on the whole. So, I thought it was only fair to say these are the best serious ones and these are the best funny ones.
Yeah, and the funny ones are only that funny because you've come through everything else to get to this point, and also the fact they're in sharp contrast to the rest of the season.
Yeah, they're in sharp contrast, and they tend to make fun of kind of X-Files tropes and stuff like that. So I think if you came in and just watched the comedy ones, you wouldn't really understand the X-Files.
No, I would make a case that you could probably still nominate Clyde Bruckman overall.
Clyde Bruckman is the closest, or possibly home, to being an actual serious X-Files episode. It's not that far out the vein, despite having some really amusing dialogue in there.
Neither episode is about critiquing the X-Files and how it operates or anything. It is just
I'd add Humbug.
And Humbug, yeah.
But your likes of Jose Chung and this one...
And Coprophages.
Unusual Suspects.
Yeah.
Don't work in kind of isolation.
No, you need to know who all these people are and what they've been doing for this to actually work for you. So yeah, I mean, I completely go, but I agree. But I would say there's a case to be made for some episodes, funny ones to actually break out from that limitation. It's a shame Jose Chung is actually trapped in this because it doesn't work if you've not got here naturally.
No.
And it's the only reason it's so funny is because you've got here through all the other stuff.
I'm still saying Clyde Bruckman's my favourite.
I know. But okay, so if we've got nothing else?
No, I think that about covers it. This is possibly the high point of the season so far, I think.
Yes. I mean, we need to leave season discussion for a while, but this season has fallen in my estimation so far.
I think we're exactly halfway through now as well.
And we've had a very rough ride. This has not been great experience revisiting these episodes.
You've had a couple of gems, but yeah, on the whole, it's not been as good as I remembered it.
No, and we do keep speculating this. How much of this is the film has warped this season, and that puts some pressures on what they needed to do, and that's causing problems. I'm interested to see how season 6 is once the film is out of the way.
I do remember that season 6 contains some Monster of the Week episodes I really like, but I've got to admit that from early season 6, I can't really remember the conspiracy that well, so I guess we'll see how that kind of pans out.
And we will next week, given we have Patient X and Red and the Black to deal with.
Oh, we're finally here, are we?
We are here. And you're not going to escape it this time, so you're doing double Conspiracy Corner next week.
Woohoo!
You've got to do Emily.
Oh, I forgot Emily, didn't I?
We completely forgot to do it, fair. To be fair to us, what you can extrapolate of Emily isn't much.
It's only just a conspiracy episode.
I cannot remember, I suspect it's the capstone of the thing that started in Dwayne Barry. Which is kind of fascinating given that Dwayne Barry itself was already written, but most of the implications from Dwayne Barry are because Gillian Anderson was pregnant.
Yeah.
And so this strikes me as a bit like the Frasier thing with Niles and Daphne of, you never intended this to be a long-running plot line. It developed it, the fans latched onto it. You can't get rid of it very easily.
Yeah,
But
true.
I think Emily is the end of that process. From what I remember, I'm prepared to be wrong, but I don't think it actually sort of gets any further after that.
Yeah.
But we'll see. But anyway, next week, it's all conspiracy all the time.
I remember these two being pretty good, so I hope I'm not going to be disappointed.
In the meantime, if you'd like to get hold of us, our email address is thingsgettingstrange42@gmail.com.
Alternatively, you can find us on social media, and do hook me up if you want us to promote anything at the start of our show. We are on Twitter and Tumblr at GetStrange42. We are on Mastodon at GetStrange42@universedon.com. And on Facebook, you can find us by searching for Things Are Getting Strange and X-Files Rewatch Podcast. Additionally, if you're not sick of my voice by now, I also have a channel on Twitch TV. It's called Adverse Camber 42. I also have a YouTube channel that shows past episodes of my Twitch under the same name. I stream 3 times a week live. It's Mondays and Wednesdays at 8 p.m. GMT and Saturdays at 5 p.m. GMT. Just streaming whatever I'm currently playing on the PlayStation 5. As of recording this episode, it's currently the Dark Pictures anthology House of Ashes, though I'm expecting that's only going to take another episode or so to finish, and afterwards I'll be moving on to Lies of P.
Cool. We have a Patreon, patreon.com/thingsAreGettingStrange, where you can get hold of our various bonus episodes and help support us if you feel like, and get these episodes early. Woohoo. So currently, for bonus stuff, we have a review, in inverted commas, of Mordor and Scully by Catatonia. But starting next month, we'll do our Let's Plays of the first X-Files game.
Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. I've been vaguely enjoying playing it. It's an experience.
It's an experience, yes. It's, yeah, it does feel like it was bait and switch even at the time of, here is the X-Files game, here are Jude Nelson and David Duchovny, and there they go. Now you get this guy.
I'm assuming we'll get back to them eventually, and not just Craig Wilmore.
Guessing it was expensive to hire them? I don't know. It does feel a bit weird.
But yeah, enjoy that starting early next month, but only on our Patreon. We do have 3 tiers on the Patreon at various prices. You get different perks for each tier, but if you back us at any level, you will have access to this Let's Play.
Lowest tier is $3, so hope that encourages some of you.
It'll keep me in coffee.
It will keep you in coffee. Our theme music is A Vision by Kevin MacLeod. You can find that on incompetech.com, licensed under the Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. Thank you all for listening, and until next time, please remember...
That's essentially the way it happened.